Okay, this is Marie with the Mid-Florida Bigfoot Research Group, and we're here on our camp out, having a great time. There's Ruby, everybody. But we have a special guest. His name is Vern, and he had some incredible experiences when he was a kid in Ohio. So Vern, you want to tell us about what you did and what you experienced as a child?
Oh.
How old were you?
Huh?
How old were you?
Well, the first time anything happened, I was about 8 years old. And we were watching TV in our living room at late in the evening. I decided to go crawl down the hallway, because I was only like 7 or 8. Crawl down the hallway to my baby bed in Mom and Dad's room, get my little blankie so I could be cozy watching the TV show. And I got down to my bed, and as I was getting ready to get the blanket, something was outside the window, outside the screen, but the light shining down the hall, you couldn't see what was outside the screen. Something was there, but I didn't know what. So then I grabbed my blanket real quick, so then I'm scared, so I start heading out of the bedroom, and then that's when he hit me with the infrasound. And it's like being at the bottom of a swimming pool trying to scream in water. You can't do it. So I was literally paralyzed. I mean, my whole body's shaking, the insides and everything. And finally then that stopped. And then, you know, I'm screaming, and Mom and Dad come running in, and the whole 9 yards on that. That was one of the very first things. The next thing we had happen was my older sister went down doing ironing some clothes in the morning before school, and it was dark out in the morning. And she come running upstairs screaming. She seen something looking in the basement window with red glowing eyes and a hair all around its head. So she seen that one. And then the next time, it was in the middle of the night, probably about 12 o'clock. My mom said she was the last one to bed. You know, we didn't have AC, so the windows are all open screens. She said she heard something step up on the back porch really lightly on the concrete on the patio. And then the dog went crazy. And then something took off running around the house, past all of our bedroom windows. We had cattle and horses and everything on the farm. And when this thing went running by, I mean, the moon was setting to the west. You could see outside daylight, but there's no sound, no crickets at night. And when this thing went by our window, I mean, I know what a horse 800 or 900 pounds sounds. When this thing went by the window, I'm going to say it probably weighed in at least 1,200 pounds or better. And it went right across the road, about a mile back to the woods. There was woods across the road, woods down the creek behind our place. So when that ran by, I mean, that loud steps, we didn't dare get out of bed to see what it was. Scared us all so bad. And the next time I was on the playground at school, which is only about a half mile up on top of the hill from our home, up on the hill. And we're out on the playground, my buddy and I, and we're talking. The kids are playing jump rope and stuff. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, recess out. Kind of cool morning. And all of a sudden I happen to look up in the tree, and I see something black up in the tree, and like, what in the world is that? My buddy's like, what are you looking at? And I said, well, Clay, what is that in that tree up there, right there on the playground? He said, what is that? He said, man, that kind of looks like a monkey, don't it? And about that time, he fell out of the tree. And as soon as he hit the ground, he ran straight, about 50-foot run. He ran about 50 feet and went into the cornfield. He was so fast when he passed all the other kids, none of them even seen him. Probably took him, I'm thinking it might have taken him one whole second to go 50 feet. And then the other time I've seen him running, I pretty sure they can run the length of a football field in about 5.5 to 6 seconds, maybe 6 seconds tops, if they're all out getting it, you know, a full-grown one or whatever.
Right.
But,
so you had, what about the creek?
The one at the creek, my mom should never let me go to the creek. I was only 9 years old, and I went down there all summer long. So I go down there and take my quart jar and tie a string around it, lower it in the water, and I wait for the minnows to go in, pick it back up, catch a minnow. So I'd been going down there about a week or so. All of a sudden one morning, I'm down there at the edge of the water, about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm playing, a beautiful spring morning. And all of a sudden I feel a hand on my left shoulder. Now this would have really freaked me out, but that summer before, we'd been to the Cincinnati Zoo, and I'd seen the gorillas, the monkeys, all of them. So I knew what they looked like. So I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I'm like, what's that? And I turned around and looked, and there was a baby sasquatch, a baby Bigfoot. He was a little bit bigger than me, a little bit taller than me, a little more muscular, had a bad body odor like my dad had when he'd come home from work every day, like sweating all day, that smell. And he wasn't even looking at me in the face. He was looking at my hands, what I was doing. He was interested, wanting to know what was I doing. And I caught that. He was the cutest thing. He was all black hair. The tips of his hair had a little touch of white, and his eyes were blue. These eyes are blue. Cutest little thing you ever laid eyes on. Didn't scare me at all. So I start showing him what I'm doing with the jar, trying to catch the minnows. And then I start thinking, well, I know I shouldn't be down here. What's he doing down here by himself? So I'm looking around. I look up on the bench we had on high ground, where you sit up there and fish over the deep water. There was a bench up there. When I looked up there, there was the male, the big male, was sitting up there. He stood probably about 7 feet tall, but he looked almost all gorilla. But this little one had more of a face of a human, of a person, like a kid, ears, the whole 9 yards. So we're playing there, so I wasn't shocked at all. I mean, I had no reason to be scared of him, you know. This is all new to me, but it didn't scare me. So I'm showing him for about 20 minutes what I'm doing, and then I let him try it. He's not having any luck. And all of a sudden I hear a grunt, and I turn around and looked, and the big one's gone. I looked, he's over there on the other side of the fence on the pathway. He'd already crossed over the fence, never heard a sound. And he's standing over there waiting on the little one. As soon as he grunted, man, that little one was up and gone. He went across that fence, and the two of them went off on the pathway, just disappeared like a flash of lightning. Well, then the next morning I get up, and from the Cincinnati Zoo, I had a little plastic gorilla about that tall. So I stuck it in my pocket. I got it at the gift shop. Stuck it in my pocket. I went downstairs, and I got another can in another glass jar, mason jar. Took it upstairs. Mom's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I want to take another jar down. She said, I already gave you a jar. I said, well, can you tie string in this? I said, this is for my friend. I almost let it slip. She said, what do you mean your friend? I said, oh, never mind, Mom. I said, just tie string on it so I can go. So I got down there, and I went down there. I swear to God, I went there 5 or 10 minutes. And here they showed up again. Same scenario. And the big one, he never even paid attention to us. All he was doing was rubbing his eyes like allergies and looking across the creek, out across the water, the other side of the creek, just sitting there. Never once really paid attention to me and the little one, which I found it kind of odd. And so I'm showing the little one how to do it with his jar. I gave him the jar, and he was getting upset because he couldn't catch one. So I said, well, let's do it. Let me show you. So we took the jars back there, dumped the water out, turned a cup of flat rock over, got some worms. I put a worm in his jar, a worm in my jar, and I pointed my finger. So we went back over to the water. It wasn't but a minute. He had a big old minnow go inside of his jar, or a sunfish or something. And he jerked it up and had it. And he started carrying on like a cat. Have you ever hear a cat hiss at you?
Really?
He was excited.
Oh, wow.
He started going, and he just like breathing real heavy.
Oh, wow.
And holding that jar and shaking then. He was shaking.
He was so excited.
And I said, you got one, and all this. And then next thing I know, I hear the, and I'm like, what? And then we hadn't been there like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And I was like, what? And I turned around and looked, and there's a big one across the fence again, already waiting on the little one. And the little one jumped up and started running off. I said, wait, wait, wait. And he stopped and turned around. And I reached in my back pocket, and I pulled out that little play gorilla, plastic gorilla, handed it to him. And he got that, and he looked at that, and his eyes got huge, and he held it right up to his face like he's having trouble. He couldn't see, and he's holding it this close to his face, looking at it, just staring at it. And then the big one grunted again, and then he went across, just turned his head like it was nothing, went across the fence. And off they went.
Did he take it with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
And about 15 seconds, 20 seconds later, I heard the old man that owned the property coming down with his team of mules. He had a drag that he drug, and the mules pulled it. He rode on it. So he comes down and he's like, Vern, what are you doing down here? I said, what? And he says, well, what are you doing? Why did your mom let you come down here? I said, I come down here all the time. She lets me come down. So on the way home, I had 2 bread bags, empty bread bags, and I stopped halfway home and get apples, and I get home, she make apple fritters. So that day, like usual, I'm halfway home, get to the apple tree, I fill up a bag, tie it, get the other bag out, and I start to fill it up, and all of a sudden, here's this little guy on the other side of the daggone fence, comes over and jumps over the fence where I'm at, and starts helping me pick up apples. But the problem was, all he wanted to do was pick up all the rotten apples. And he kept putting rotten ones in the bag. I was like, oh, no. So I dumped it out, and I picked up a good one. I said, that's what I want right there. Showing him right in front of his face. Started putting apples in. Man, he started throwing the rotten ones in there too. Right again. So then, I was getting kind of impatient with him, so I dumped it out, and then I realized he's about to lose his rockers. You know, he's impatient. I think when they're always impatient, they want it now.
Right.
And all of a sudden then, we started picking up apples again. He started putting rotten ones in the third time. I was like, look, if it makes you happy, I don't care what you put in the damn bag. So we filled it up with a bunch of bad ones. And I started heading home. I told him, thank you, blah, blah, blah. I'm heading home. It's 10 o'clock. I got to be getting, Mom won't let me go for an hour or so down there. So I start walking. And I turn around and look, he's following me. I look around, I don't see the big one. He's in the bush on this side of the road, or he's in the big cornfield. He's there close. I know he didn't leave the little one alone. And this little one's trying to follow me home. I said, oh, buddy, no, you can't go home with me. I said, that ain't going to go over very good. And he's standing there looking at me. I said, you need to go home. So I started walking. He starts following me again. I said, no, you got to go home. So I'm pointing over his head at the creek, down toward the creek. You need to go home. Go home. Go home. And then he'd look down toward the creek, and then he'd look back at me like he's losing his best buddy. And after I'd done that several times, and like with a sad face, he turned around and started walking back toward the creek. Never seen him again the rest of my life.
No?
No.
Oh, my God.
I think the bigger one realized that letting us two be near
Too
each
close.
other was not right. Was maybe the wrong thing to do.
And where was
Never
this
seen him
at?
again. Huh?
Where did this take place at?
Southwestern Ohio.
Southwestern Ohio.
But that's just the beginning of it. I mean, I've been hit by the what do you call it?
Infrasound?
Infrasound 3 times in my life. I've been growled at twice. Never been bum rushed, but they had no reason to. They knew me growing up the creek. When I every time I go to the creek, my hair would stand up on end. I would hear about 4 knocks up on a hill somewhere, on the hillside. And then by the time I could walk down to the bottom, down to where the creek was, that I always played on the sandbar and at the creek, then right away, up a creek or down creek, or sometimes both, you'd start hearing the rocks clapping.
Mm-hmm.
And then within a minute or two, you start hearing the samurai
chatter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd hear it up the creek or down the creek, or sometimes both. They knew I was there. So I finally figured it out after all these years, since I'm older. In a way, I was entertainment for them. When I would come to the creek, it's like, oh, hey, he's back, you know?
Right.
So then the clamming of the rocks would go, and they'd start carrying on like some family arguing, you know? And then on the way out, almost every day, they would follow me in the cornfield, the little ones would, and they would throw gravel out at me. We'd be walking along, I could hear them pace me, and I'd stop, then they'd stop. And then, as soon as they'd stop, there'd be a couple pebbles come out. So I got used to getting me some pebbles before I left, little pea gravel, because we had a gravel pit back there by the creek too. So I get a handful. So on the way home, it's walk, stop, some gravel come out, I throw some gravel in, and then I walk on. Well, we do this, you know, all the way up the cornfield, you know, for half a mile or better. And then I started thinking, why am I afraid of them? So I was like, so when I would stop, they'd throw gravel at me. As soon as the gravel would come out of the corn, I would dive over, and right where the rocks came from, I'd dive over in that cornfield as far as I could dive. I mean, I'd leap over there. Never seen anything. So then I would never see nothing. So I'd come back, and I'd get back on the trail to go home, and then I'd start hearing their giggling. You could barely hear it, but you could hear them giggling, making fun of me.
That's
but
cool.
I tried to dive over in that cornfield. The gravel no sooner came, And as soon as I'm seeing flying in the air, I dive right over into the corner.
And nothing.
Never
saw anything.
And I believe they could, like
They-
a little kid.
They
Like
make
a little
it.
kid, like a little 5 years old, giggling. You know, it's something funny. Yeah, my sister even heard it. We were talking about the other night on the phone. I never told anybody about this my whole life.
Right.
But this is, I mean, I've had gravel thrown at me probably 70 or 80 times, walking, pacing me out 70 or 80 times. Every time I go to the creek, my hair'd stand on end, but I just go right on about what I'm doing because I knew it was them. They didn't bother me, I didn't bother them. I had the one time I fell into deep water and I couldn't swim. I started screaming for help. And the big one that I seen the first time, the big one, it came in and carried me out of that daggone water.
Whoa.
And I'm telling you what, it was like you were wrapped in a heating pad. That's how hot his body was. When he picked me up and carried me out of that water, his body was so hot I could not miss noticing that, how hot the temperature was of his body. Laid me down, I'm coughing, spitting water out, and then all of a sudden look around and there's nobody there. So I ran home. My mom's like, "What happened to you?" I said, "I fell in the creek, Mom." She says, "My God." She said, "Why do you stink so bad for?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, I never told Mom about this because I'd never get to go to the creek again. So I said, "Well, I don't know, Mom. Well, you need to get out back and get those clothes off." She said, "You stink to high heaven." And that's
Right.
that's why I stunk so bad. It wasn't a creek of water.
That's cool.
But, I mean, these things happen. So many things I had happen my whole life. I mean, I started writing it down. I ran through 9 pages of things that happened, and I got more.
That's amazing.